So this is how it went. Following the E3 2014 showcase trailer of Legend of Zelda Wii U, I and indeed most of the internet began to speculate about what this new Zelda game would be like. So I decided to gather up all my speculations in anticipation of making a video in time for E3 of this year, when I'm sure we'd get more information. To anyone who wasn't paying attention, we of course didn't. Not even a fucking title, I mean just come on, anything. Which leaves me in this position with lots to say and no real opportunity to do so.
So, before we get started, I just want to mention that everything I say in this video is from the perspective of someone who loves the series. I grew up with it, I've played every single game in the franchise, and I've loved virtually every second of it. The points I bring up, I do so because I care. Greatly.
The biggest headline made from the original Zelda Wii U trailer was the idea of an open world in a Zelda game. Now, this isn't as much of a dramatic reveal as you'd first think, because the original Legend of Zelda for the NES was one of the first video games to ever really try this. Part of the reason why so many people feel so indifferent about the first Zelda game is because how open everything is. There's still a set order you need to do things in, but the world itself is full of so many secrets and extra items that it really hits home the concept of an adventure game. So what if you get lost? Better do some more exploring then. And this ties in nicely with what Zelda Wii U is claiming. Open world might not be that new for the Zelda series as a whole, but it's definitely something we haven't seen too often, or really at all, in the 3D outings within the franchise. Each game has an overworld, but you couldn't exactly go from one point on the map to another point on the map if you felt like it, due to the game placing restrictions on you so you didn't do things out of order. Which is helpful from the whole not getting lost perspective, but not entirely in the spirit of exploring a world. You don't want to be told that you can't go to a place. What if that place has something awesome waiting for me? Hell, even if it doesn't, I still want to check it out. Doing things in a game out of order successfully shows that the game is fully prepared for a lot of different angles of entry. Does that work? Is anyone going to get what I mean by that?
This is an issue I've had with Zelda games for a little while now. You get the sense you've got this huge overworld that you can explore from the very beginning of your adventure, only to come to the gradual realization that huge parts of it are blocked off because you haven't got the right item or you haven't finished a particular task. I think Egaraptor summed it up when he described it as like a guided tour of a game. You can do many things, you can go many places, but make sure you go to the place you're supposed to eventually. You can't get lost, don't do that. But then, A Link Between Worlds came along.
I'm not going to mince my words here. A Link Between Worlds is easily the most important Zelda game since Ocarina of Time. Throwing the series forward into 3D was a big step forward, but A Link Between Worlds opened up a whole new world of possibilities simply by allowing you to complete the dungeons in whatever order you feel like. Initially it might not seem like a lot, in a way it actually lessens the impact of each individual dungeon and how they link together, but it gives the player buckets more freedom, the likes that haven't been seen since A Link to the Past back in 1991. Suddenly every playthrough doesn't have to feel the same. You can mix it up every time you play it, and the game has the kind of replayability that adventure games should have. I know Zelda games especially have player-enforced challenges like 3-heart runs or minimalist runs, but who's to say that you can't do that with A Link Between Worlds as well? The more interesting question is if Zelda Wii U adopts this idea too, and that's not really a question. You might think, yeah, of course it would. It's a natural fit of an open world. But something that sets Zelda games apart from each other is their willingness to try new things from one game to the next. If you look at every Zelda game and its relation to every other Zelda game, there's been very few sequels in the 29 years of the franchise. Zelda 2 might have been titled like a sequel, but it couldn't have been further removed from the first game if it had tried. The only real sequels were Majora's Mask in relation to Ocarina of Time, and Spirit Tracks up against Phantom Hourglass. And both sequels were different enough to avoid too many comparisons and to get praise for what they do right rather than because, hey, they're pretty similar to those other games we liked, let's just copy and paste the review from a while ago. Part of the reason why the Zelda series is so successful is because no two Zelda games are really that similar. You might spend one game travelling between 2 points in time between adult and child versions of Link, but in the next game you're trying to save a completely different world from a completely different threat and in a much shorter time span. I mean, the basic adventure is usually the same. You've still got a wide assortment of dungeons to travel through, items to pick up in said dungeons and bosses to defeat with those items, but the style of each Zelda game is radically different from game to game. It's almost like asking 16 painters to each draw a sunflower in their own unique way. Except all these painters are in fact combined in the collective minds of the Zelda development team. It's a shaky analogy, but I feel it works.
But this creates an alternate issue. If you radically change the design of your series from game to game, what are you actually achieving? Sure, it'll look altered and innovative, but when the core mechanics aren't freshened up, all you're doing is painting it a different colour. You might have some groundbreaking new feature which will entice people to play it, but come the next game, it's gone.
So, people of the internet, I have two questions for you. Firstly, what was the last big innovation the Zelda series had, in terms of a new idea added that changed how future Zelda games would be developed? Honestly, it's not easy to think of one. I mean, I've spent a good 6 months thinking about it, and the best I could come up with was most of what Ocarina of Time added. The L targeting, being able to travel across an overworld quickly thanks to your noble steed, generally being in 3D, that sort of stuff. You could maybe make a case for the cell shading added in Wind Waker, but firstly, it wasn't a widespread change enforced to all future games, and secondly, graphics from a gameplay perspective don't really mean that much. The second question is simply this. People who played Skyward Sword, whether you like the motion control sword combat or not, frankly I couldn't care less at this stage, would you expect Zelda Wii U to adopt this as well? The Wii U is certainly capable of using Wii Motion Plus, as shown off in Nintendo Land's Battle Quest minigame, but considering how heavily focused much of the early showings of Skyward Sword were on its motion controls, I highly doubt that we'll see it return for Zelda Wii U. And so what does all of this mean? Well, it means that the series doesn't often see a true upgrade. A game that comes along and immediately makes all games that came before totally obsolete. That's not necessarily a bad thing because it lets people enjoy a lot of very different games for their own qualities. However, from a development standpoint and constantly trying to improve on what you did previously, you're actually making games that feel more like side grades than upgrades. Not moving the series forward per se, just somewhere else. I could easily extend the when was the last innovation question to when was the last Zelda game not to be based around a particular gimmick. Although I hesitate to use the word gimmick because each new mechanic introduced, motion controls in Skyward Sword, the 3-day time limit in Majora's Mask, being shrunk down to the size of a Pikmin in Minish Cap, work extremely well in their own respective games. But looking at them from a series point of view, the franchise in its entirety shows just how short-lived these ideas are. Granted, revisiting the same unique parts of these games in a later game would be seen as rehashing ideas and a lack of creativity, but do you really want these games to be remembered as, hey, it's that Zelda game where you go sailing, hey, it's that Zelda game where you turn into a wolf, when there's so much more than that? Incidentally, the last Zelda game not to be based on a series gimmick? Probably Link's Awakening, but even then, not so sure.
So where exactly does that leave us? The good news, and these aren't my words, rather the words of series director Eiji Aonuma, is that A Link Between Worlds and Zelda Wii U are both designed to rethink the conventions of Zelda, stripping away the time travel and the control of elements, and getting back to what made Zelda amazing when it first came out, the ability to replicate the adventurous feel from the NES game in the modern day.
And this is where it gets interesting, because the big thing that Nintendo wanted to show the world about Zelda Wii U didn't have anything to do with controls or graphics. Instead, it was about something that would have a huge impact on the gameplay. Open world in a Zelda game could well be the perfect fit for the most iconic adventure series out there. Combining it with the concept of doing parts of the game in whatever order you want, another addition that doesn't really come across as a series gimmick, and we could well have the quintessential Zelda game that we've been needing for quite a while. Just make sure that you fill that overworld with things to do. With how much Nintendo has been emphasising that Zelda Wii U's world is gonna be huge, it'd be a shame if it ended up like Shadow of the Colossus and just had a whole load of empty spaces. I know that was the point in Shadow of the Colossus, but we don't want the next Zelda game to be like Shadow of the Colossus. Or at least not like that. Feel free to throw in some giant boss fights if you like, I'm not picky.
This has been RabbidLuigi, and in a way, the news that Nintendo were going to delay the release of Zelda Wii U until 2016 couldn't have been anything other than a good thing. The game's already due to push the Wii U to its absolute limits, so more time to iron out bugs and make a great game, the better. Personally, I'm still trying to temper my expectations, but it's proving rather difficult, because come sometime next year, something massive's on the way.
Hey everybody, thanks for watching. Sorry if this wasn't quite what a lot of people were expecting, but I needed a bit of a mental break from top 5s just to give me something else to think about. Though if you enjoyed this and would like me to make more, be sure to hit that like button in order to show me a bit more clearly. Got plenty of ideas if you want more. Anyway, next week we're back to our scheduled broadcasting with top 5 alternate endings. Feeling pretty fresh now.